come on.
Like the quiz part is more just a prompt to move on to each figure. But yeah, it's not like.
What are the figures we're covering again?
Okay.
Our sources. Is that it?
Yeah. So we're covering the Buddha, Jesus, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Taoism, the Hindu gods, the Trimurti. So that's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and then Hindu goes a lot different branches from there.
So many.
Yeah.
So we can avoid discussions of like transmogrification.
If you want to bring it up, that's fine. I do want to talk about focus on the people behind the faith, though. So and that will obviously get into their ideas, but more about how these people and their ideas have informed each of our unique perspectives. The Jewish figures of Judaism, like Moses, Abraham, Muhammad, Guru Nanak for the Sikh.
I've recently been. I don't know much about Sikhism. I've been recently investigating. Very interesting. He's the one that compiled everything into the book, I believe, right?
Yeah. The Celtic and Norse pantheons, which form those modern Wicca and pagan, neo-pagan rituals and practices.
I feel like I'm on a talk show.
We're going to take a break for the offering.
Excuse me.
And then we're going to come back and I'm going to ask each of you about your own prophetic voices that you'd like to bring up, living or dead. Got your notebook. And then we'll go into some questions about the voices in aggregate in comparison, just for the group.
Yeah, sometimes right now I have one kid with me. Sometimes I have 3.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Channing Unitarian Universalist Church. Whoever you are, whatever your background, wherever you come from, whatever your identity, we're glad you joined us here today. We're doing something a little different. I don't know if we've ever done this before, but usually I'll find out from Danny later. Oh yeah, we did that back in the 80s.
1880s.
Yeah. So we are doing a panel. Now, don't feel like it's just going to be us talking. There will be time for your questions and comments as well. But I wanted to gather people from our music and worship committee, as well as the chair of our credential board and
co-chairs.
Oh, that's right, you're co-chairs. I don't go to the meetings. To talk about prophetic voices. So Unitarian Universalists, we don't have a dogma. You're not required to be only a UU. Most of us are a UU hyphen something else, or the other way around, depending on which we put first in our religious or spiritual identity. Like I identify as an atheist UU, and yet I chair music and worship. So. Others may think of themselves as Buddhist UUs or Catholic UUs or UU Episcopalian. That's Reverend Judy. But part of that is because as UUs, as part of our ongoing exploration, we are seeking out voices to give us ideas, not necessarily direction, but just like an idea of where the next step on each of our journeys goes. However, in a lot of that journeying, we often sometimes forget to quote some of these primary sources. Like we celebrate the births and sometimes deaths of a lot of religious figures, including Jesus, but they're rarely mentioned, or their teachings or their the things that they've said in their lifetimes that make them our prophetic voices, they rarely come up in our services. We're usually quoting somebody else who is talking about them. So I wanted to get back to, for this panel and this discussion, who are the prophetic voices that, are those steps on our path. How did we get to where we are and where do we think we're going based on these, I call them primary religious figures, but then, they're not really primary sources in a lot of cases because the things that are written that they allegedly said and did are often hundreds of years after they died anyway. But, getting to those figures. All right, so I'm going to start off. I'll introduce the panel, and I'll start. I'm the host, Rick Snee, and then we'll just go down the couch. Each of you can introduce yourselves and how you describe yourselves as a UU.
Will we also be doing announcements at some point?
Let's introduce the panel, and then we'll do some announcements.
Because this is the one day that I have some.
Okay.
Oh, the one day?
The one day.
UU administrator.
The show start. I'm Lauren Hannah Murphy. I've been at Channing since 2008, and I think that's correct. Maybe 2007. And I am the assistant treasurer, and I'm on the music and worship committee. I actually would just describe myself as a Unitarian Universalist because my beliefs have changed and evolved and continue to do so. And so that is the label that fits me best since any hyphenates after or before it will change over time and have changed over time.
I'm Julie. I've been here at Channing since 2018. I'm currently one of the co-chairs of the Prudential Committee for the new folks. That's like the governing board of this organization. I would say that I'm probably a solidly pagan UU, although I was raised Catholic and there's still kind of remnants of that upbringing. But like Lauren, it's constantly changing and evolving, which is why I like it here.
I'm Mike Helvey, and I'm not sure what I am.
I think that just makes you a
neither are
UU.
we.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and I lean more towards Buddhism now. But I like any religion that is loving and caring and compassionate.
Oh, is it my turn?
Yes.
I'm Jude Campbell. I'm the sexton, they used to call it, which means caretaker or custodian. I guess I'm a UU, and lately I've been thinking of calling myself a UUWW because Unitarian Universalist wishy-washy. Because I like the fact that 1 week I believe in Jesus, and 3 weeks later I'm all about Buddha, and that's okay. So,
So before we get into the show, Julie, you have some announcements.
Yes, just brief.
Okay.
First, I appreciate everybody bearing with us in this very unusual setup. There's a play going on this week by Elemental Repertory Theater, and they decided to use our living room as their set instead of building a set for the stage. And we didn't want to disrupt their production, so we figured we would just use their set as the seating. So yes.
there are still tickets available for
Yes,
today's show as well.
There's still
online if
tickets
you want.
available for today's show. It's at 3:30 in case anybody wants to go. They are very kindly donating 50% of their ticket sales to the church. So spread the word if you know anybody that is looking for something to do this afternoon. My other announcement, well, I guess I have two quick ones. Next weekend, on Sunday, we have a Prudential Committee meeting. So anybody here who's on the Prudential Committee or serves as an officer, we're going to go through our budget and review the plans that are upcoming for events and stuff. Anybody is welcome to attend those meetings. You do not have to be a member of a committee. You don't even have to be a member of the church. You're welcome to sit in and listen and share your opinions and ideas. My final announcement is we changed vendors for our dumpster. So there's a new dumpster out back and a new service provider. This new contract also includes 2 curbside recycling bins. So we can now recycle materials and not put them in the dumpster. So the curbside bins can accept aluminum and metal cans, plastic containers, glass jars and bottles, paper, junk mail, and newspapers, phone books, catalogs, and magazines. What's a phone book? Cardboard and paper.
Kind of like Facebook.
But it's very true. But please, no plastic bags, no styrofoam, no food, no clothes, no electronics, no yard waste, no hazardous waste or trash. Most of that stuff we can take in the dumpster. Some of it we can't accept at all. It would have to go to the town dump, like electronics. But anyway, we have recycle bins around and like labeled containers for recycling. So please make sure you separate your recycling because we can actually recycle it now.
Yay.
And a big thank you to Jude for hounding the previous service provider to get their dumpster off our property.
Yes.
I threatened storage fees. I'll charge you a storage fee if you want to leave it.
Are there any other announcements, fundraisings or anything coming up?
Yeah, we have a chocolate auction coming up.
Yes.
The, Sunday before Valentine's Day.
It's the 9th, I think.
Anything chocolate, we ask that you fill out a card that has ingredients or whatever for anybody that may have allergies. If you have any questions during coffee hour, you can check with me or with Ellen, and give you some more information.
Yes, I thank you. Also, next Sunday, the 19th, we are hosting the first in a series of movie viewings. We're calling the series You Use in the Movies. We picked a handful of movies that are somehow connected to either a Unitarian, a Universalist, or a Unitarian Universalist. So the first one is Sunday at 1 p.m. here, right after service. It's a recommended donation of $5, but if you don't have $5, it's okay. We won't turn anyone away. We're gonna sell some refreshments, and we're gonna watch Barbie. And the reason we're gonna watch Barbie is because the director, Greta Gerwig, is a lifelong UU. She was raised in a UU church. Her parents were married in a UU church. So, and if you watch them, I've already seen it. If you watch the movie, you can really see a lot of her UU values come through in her art. So that's why we picked it, that, and we want to dress up in pink. So
You don't have to justify.
What time is it?
it is Sunday at 1 p.m. Yeah, the 19th.
I'll make sure to come back in time.
Bring all of those people
Yeah.
with you.
So one more thing before we're going to start with a chalice lighting. Anyone who's right there and want to handle the fire? I'll just quickly. Kindling this flame of our liberal heritage in our chalice of community, let us open to the presence of the sacred. More talk shows like this, right there in the middle. All right, so let's start what I'm calling whose prophetic voice is it anyway? Or if you don't have a TV and listen to NPR, wait, don't smite me. All right, so I'm going to describe a figure, and we'll see if the panel can figure out who I'm talking about. Okay.
You didn't give us buzzers.
No, it's all, just blurt it out. All right, when he orders a hot dog, this prince turned ascetic always asks them to make him one with everything.
Buddha,
Si hátra fanno pure Shakyamuni. His whole name.
more specific.
So, tell me about if Buddha is incorporated into any of your spiritual journey right now, or ever has been. Tell me about your experiences with the Buddha.
Well, I love the Buddhist teachings, and I like that Buddha is not intended to be a religion either. It's just a way of being, and the whole idea of the mindfulness, just being aware, being in the present moment. It's so powerful that it's just a great way to be.
I admire the Buddha because after his first teachings, he gave this whole explanation of the universe and existence and what he believed. And then he said, that's what I believe. I might be wrong. Go find out for yourself. If it's not for you, find something that does work for you. And that just blew me away, because most others are, you got to believe this or you're going to burn in hell, basically. And he said, works for me. I hope it works for you. And then encourage people to just go you-and, basically, and find out what does work for you.
And you,
Also,
oh, go ahead.
it's just very practical. It's not dogmatic at all. They believe in gods and that they exist. But what use is it and what fun is it when you can do everything? You could become a god by advancing through enlightenment. But once you're a god, it gets pretty boring because you can do anything. That's their attitude towards it. So human existence is actually preferred. They say that's the best because this is your chance for enlightenment. Here, once you're a god, you can only get so enlightened. You know? Yeah. There are treaties that talk about the boredom of the gods in the whole Mahayana vehicle, which is Tibetan Buddhism. Mahayana is the greater vehicle. Theravada is the lesser. And it doesn't mean better or worse. It means that the Tibetan style has more commentary and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And the Theravada is closer to the original teaching because Vietnam, Southeast Asia was isolated for a while after they received the teaching. And I'll stop there because I could go on for Buddha and let somebody else talk for a while.
So part of Buddhism is detaching from letting your possessions possess you. Do I have that right?
Mhm.
What
Well,
have you struck?
The basic teaching of Buddha, his first teaching is life is pain, princess. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something, basically. He's life is pain, not to be, and that's why people think it's a negating religion or a negative outlook, but it's really not. Life is pain. He means that it's unavoidable. You're gonna suffer because most people want things to be otherwise, and it's wanting things to be other than what they are that causes you your suffering. And so if you can get right with it is what it is, basically, and be detached, you can be, like Jesus would say, in the world but not of it. So it's kind of the basic same teaching.
So what kind of things have you had to learn to accept or not let possess you?
Well, so much. I don't know. I think Buddhism helped me quit drinking, even though I studied Buddhism while I was a drunk and I read it for years. When I decided to quit, it really did help because I had to detach myself from it, which I think, and I don't think I could have lived upstairs from a bar for a year and a half sober if it weren't for Buddha, to be honest. And you guys.
All right, I'm going to move on to our next figure. So, according to Jimmy Carter, this man born on year 0 never said a word about homosexuality. Yeah. Do we have any incorporation of Jesus into your spiritual practice on this panel?
Certainly. It was actually because of the Catholic Church's many words on homosexuality that I left the Catholic Church, because that was not any of the actual teachings of Christ. It was the people imposing that view on their followers, and I had gay friends and family, and it didn't sit well with me. But even though I'm not Catholic anymore, I have not been for a long time, a lot of the remnants from being raised that way are still there because the things that Jesus did teach were very valuable. And, Jude mentioned one of the sayings attributed to Buddha is very similar to a saying attributed to Jesus. And there's a lot of overlap between some of their teachings and many of the other prophetic voices, which I'm sure we'll cover. And it just became clear to me that there's some sort of universal wisdom that exists in this universe. And over and over and over the generations and the eons, different people have had to re-amplify those messages, and Jesus was definitely one of those people. So
I was also raised Catholic, like all the cool people. But, and I think that with the amount of theological studies that I did for grad school and learning about really Christian history, I haven't kept as much of the Christian beliefs from my Catholic upbringing, because I've learned so much about what things actually were probably like and going on at that time. And it's like, while some of the teachings in their purest form are very positive, it's not something that I have incorporated into my spiritual life.
There's definitely a difference between, and I think that was kind of the point of the panel, is that there's a big difference between the person and the religion that took shape, often hundreds and thousands of years after they moved on in whatever shape or form. And it seems like there's a lot, because Jesus is the dominant religious figure and Christianity is the dominant religion in our society, that there is a little bit of uncomfortableness, especially coming from a UU perspective, because so much of what comes from Christianity feels antithetical to how we feel and what other religious figures, including Jesus, even said. So how do those of you that keep Jesus in your Rolodex of prophetic voices, how do you reconcile that? How do you maintain that barrier, or do you?
Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do.
I go back to, what did Jesus say? Not all of the changes that the church placed over the years and all the centuries in order to control the masses. But what Jesus said, very simple things, love your neighbor as yourself. If somebody strikes you on the cheek, turn the other cheek, which doesn't mean to be a pacifist, but to be caring, being loving to people. Return good for evil. If somebody treats you badly, you don't have to have an eye for an eye. You always do good. Don't let other people determine what you're going to do. If they treat you badly, doesn't mean you have to treat them badly again. You can always return good. And he had so many beautiful, basic things that he said. Even the people that he chose as his disciples. He didn't go to the synagogue to find people to follow him. He chose people who, many of them were considered the outcasts and the sinners.
Excuse me, and that was unusual because most people don't collect followers by, I want this guy, that guy, or that guy. They usually wait for them to come. He sought them out, which is unusual. Mhm. He's still in my life quite a bit. I mean, I am the only one of my entire family that never confirmed his faith. The one that was going to be a priest or a monk, who actually read the Bible and went, what? And wondered why it's all like Swiss cheese, if you ask me, because there's so many holes in it. You mentioned the homosexual thing. A lot of the older versions, and they leave this out, there is a scripture in which Jesus and John are cuddling one day, and he lays his head upon his chest and they fall asleep. And that's sometimes omitted from some versions of the Bible these days because of that. But he's still with me. I mean, I can't shake it. I do love what Mike said, a lot of his teachings. Ye have heard it hath been said in days of old, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, do not resist one who is evil. If one sues you in court for your tunic, offer unto him your cloak as well. For it is in the giving that we receive. Basically, that's how it goes on. It's about rising above and overcoming. A contemporary phrase might be smile, and they'll wonder what you're up to. If you can just smile in the face of jerk. It's a lot of power there, and that's what that means to me anyway. And I'd have to say this, I really do believe in loving thy neighbor as thyself. So I recommend that people start loving themselves a whole lot more, because if you love yourself a whole lot more, it's hard to hate other people. It really is. So, maybe we do love our neighbors as ourselves, but we don't love ourselves enough to be that kind. So be kinder and more loving to yourself to begin with.
There's also a lot of similarities between what Jesus said and the Buddhist teachings. Just in terms of like Thich Nhat Hanh is one of my favorite Buddhists, and what he talks about love and letting go of anger and loving people and being compassionate and Jesus was saying the same thing. Let go of the anger and be kind and caring to people.
They also both share a magical birth story as well. A Buddha's mother had a dream that a white elephant circumambulated her 3 times and entered through her right side, and then she found herself pregnant. Yeah, so much like the visitation from on high, same type of story.
Okay, we're gonna go on to our next figure. This Chinese philosopher, born in 551 BCE, coined the silver rule. Never impose on others what you would not choose for yourself.
That could be.
Yeah.
Chairman Mao.
Like I said, it's not designed
I'm
to be,
guessing
it's not designed to be
Confucius.
gotchas.
I'm getting Confucius. That's
Yeah.
what I'm guessing.
Yes. So,
Very
do any of you, have you studied Confucius? Does he factor into your spirituality, all his philosophies?
I wouldn't say that I've studied him or incorporated his philosophies, but in preparation for this, I was going through some of the quotes from him, and it's funny because of like the long running joke of Confucius say, and then it's usually like some silly thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to sift through his actual sayings because those jokes just keep coming up in the internet. And I also noticed there were a lot that were attributed to him that were also attributed to the Buddha, and they were like word for word identical. So, but so many centuries have passed that it's that kind of thing happens. But what I liked when I was finding the real ones was he believed so much in people. And a lot of his sayings that are not, shown on memes all the time were just very focused on the human condition and self-improvement and the similar things of being kind to others and that sort of thing. But one of the ones that I found, it was actually just like cited in Wikipedia. It wasn't even one of the common quotes that you see. And it was something to the effect of, there was a fire at a barn or a stable or something. And when Confucius heard about it, he went to the people who were informing him of the fire. And he said, was anybody hurt? He didn't ask about the horses or the property or what caused it or was somebody at fault. He immediately went to, were any people harmed? Like his focus was just so much on humanity. And I think that was, something that stood out to me when I was doing my 5-minute Wikipedia research.
What I know about Confucius is he's probably what we could call very conservative by our standards today. He was very much about the family unit and ancestors and honoring people in general, but mostly your family lineage. And being kind. And it was all about community with him too, a lot, working with people. And, I think he refused a couple of commissions to high office, if I remember correctly, because he felt he shouldn't do it, that it wasn't him. So maybe he lacked ambition, but I don't think so. I think he just chose his path, wisely. And I know a lot of those sayings. Confucius say, if you go to head with itchy scalp, wake up with dandruff on the fingernail.
Yes.
Silly stuff like that used to be passed around all the time. Don't go poke it in the canal. Yeah.
Okay, and so this one's often paired with Confucius. Just want to make sure, like I said, these are not intended to be gotchas. So born somewhere between the 6th and 4th century BCE, so just, narrow window there, or perhaps not at all. This Chinese philosopher may or may not have met Confucius and is the origin of, I was surprised to learn this, the surname Li. He advocated harmony and balance, including choosing when to actively do nothing, like as an action, doing nothing. This is not Confucius. It's our next
Loud
book.
stuff.
Yes, Lao Tzu. So the
Or is it Lisa?
I-
Could be.
yeah, maybe. It's as clear as Taoism or Taoism.
Yes, you can say it either way now,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
Well,
it used to be Taoism, I
Yeah.
believe.
It's just because our
It means,
consonants are different in our language. We don't have the
Taoism
same
means
sound.
gate, gateway or path. That's how-
You know, I read the Tao of Pooh and the Day of Piglets. So I consider myself to be a Taoism. But I did read those books when I was in high school. That's probably about as far as I went into incorporating Taoism into my life.
So in my own exploration of Taoism, I see some of the roots of later transcendentalism. And a lot of these feed into transcendentalism, but especially like the idea behind civil disobedience. I see that in this, choosing to actively do nothing. Seems to me like right in the wheelhouse of civil disobedience, where you go on strike or you don't pay your taxes because you're protesting the Mexican-American War.
Yeah, I did that. Or it's the war games teaching that sometimes the only winning move is not to play.
Yes.
I like Taoism actually. Like it means the gate, the way of the path, the doorway, and one is always in the way, or on the way, on the path, in the doorway. And they even have a teaching where they break it down to it also represents not the theological or philosophical way, the gate, path to heaven. It's also your daily routine that each day is a path, each day is a gate, each day is the way to enlightenment, each hour, each minute, each second, each moment. So you are perpetually in the way, always on the path, and you become aware of that. And it just supposedly helps you live life better.
With intention.
It also helps you forget a lot about the past and let go of your baggage and not so much look to the future. Whereas there are roots of Buddhism in there too, because detachment, letting go of how you define yourself sometimes in the negation of the self. By doing Taoism, they got lots of nice poems too. If you look it up, little teachings, kind of like Zen, which is probably the roots of Zen out of Taoism somewhat. I like following groups. I want to do like a family tree on a wall of religious leaders someday.
Well, I bet those branches.
Like my brother does
multiple
with
branches
bands.
back.
He likes to track bands, and on his wall, he has this one was this group, and he tracks back what group they went all the way. It's all over his wall. He makes his family tree. Been doing it for years.
By members or by influence?
By members of groups who's
Okay.
been what, like from Rush to where other band they went after this, that, and the other.
Mhm.
And you can do that with religion, because it's all. There's nothing new under the sun. It's all a rehash, as my father would say.
So Rush being the foundational text.
Yes.
Well, I have sermons I'm working on in which the prophet Clapton. So.
Who could forget the parable of the trees?
Mhm. Or standing at the crossroads.
Oh,
That's the other one he's got.
I was thinking of Rush.
Oh.
Unrest in the forest, there's trouble with the trees.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, for our next one, these gods can form a trinity or trimurti, but they encompass a faith of anywhere from 33 to hundreds to millions of gods and goddesses. Ralph Waldo Emerson claimed at least once to read from one of this religion's holy texts, the Bhagavad Gita on a daily basis to shape his evolving ideas on Protestant Christianity and transcendentalism.
Say that again?
It was a little bit wrong.
I wrote a parody. I'm reading Bhagavad Gita, baby.
Yes, the Hindu religion and all their many figures. Does anyone here incorporate Hindu into your spiritual journey?
I guess so. I guess I'm just like a mismatch. I'm just mashing it all up. I find it all very fascinating, creation stories. And there's a God, but it's all one God. in
Right.
Hinduism. It's not like there's a God of wind. That wind is an aspect of that God. Or, you know,
It's funny, it's kind of like the Christian God, which is three individual aspects of God,
yes.
but don't, yeah, the Holy
The
Trinity.
Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, or wisdom, or the Pentecost, the Comforter they call the Holy Spirit. That's why the Pentecostals do that little dance and call it down on White Sunday. But anyway, I read quite a bit about Hinduism. And little note, they never called themselves Hindus until the English arrived. You know, so that's a name they were given, Hinduism. It's not necessarily one. You know, there's no like pope or hierarchy telling them. It's just emergent from their culture, and it's just embedded so much that everything they do is the breath of God, or the will of God, or an action of God. You cannot remove yourself from it. It's just like the universe when they talk about why is there something instead of nothing, or nothing something instead of nothing. And then you realize you really can't have nothing, because to define nothing, there has to be something, and it gets really confusing. And you go round and round, and it's just circular, argument. But
What I like about all the many Hindu gods, it reminds me a bit of Unitarian Universalism, that there is no one way to Hindu, right? There's,
and such colorful costumes
yeah,
all the time. These gods they dress like amazing. They should be on the red carpet, all bejeweled and everything. But yeah, and I like how they all fold into one another, actually, in Hinduism.
and we know that those aspects probably shaped UU, and that's why there's the similarity, because a lot of the 19th century transcendentalists were reading their texts. So I don't think it's a coincidence that there's no one way to UU either.
That's also the source of, some people claim, Freudian psychology, because he was reading that stuff too, him and Jung. They incorporated a lot the archetypal imagery concept of Carl Jung. Some people say was inspired by the Hindu pantheon. Yeah.
That makes
We used to be
sense.
called the Occidental world. I don't know if you know that. And then there's the Oriental, that's it. So the Occidental took from the Oriental. Didn't tell anyone. And then 40, 50, 60 years later, people start realizing, wow, that's what Lao Tzu said. That's what Confucius said. That's what, like, again, nothing new.
Columbus type discovery.
Oops.
Yeah.
We could
Look
probably
what I
do-
found.
Is that the guy with the kooky eye? That guy? The detective? No,
We could probably do another one of these panels just on how colonialism has influenced.
I read that his mother was Jewish and he was looking to get the hell out of Europe. No, yeah.
Yeah. Explains why he went to Spain last. All right. This faith may have one God, but their adherents' beliefs are diverse, coming from individual interpretation of holy texts rather than dogma.
You got UUism on that list?
It's also incredibly similar. And I'll draw your attention to what one of our longtime members, Phil Berry, always
I was gonna
mentions.
say, is it Judaism?
It's Judaism, yeah. it's hard to nail down like, okay, this is the prophetic voice of Judaism because it is a
It's highly
chorus
individual.
of voices reinterpreting, a selection of texts over and over again, and everybody coming to it with, it's like, it's a faith of prophetic voices in a way. It's even like a rite of passage of becoming an adult is learning to read and interpret.
Mhm.
Does anyone on the panel have experience with Judaism or?
I had a friend in high school who was Jewish, and she would often invite us to some of the kind of more important services at her temple. So I went to a number of them with her. So that's about the extent of my experience.
I grew up in both in Florida and in Glenview with a lot of folks who were Jewish around me, so it never seemed anything that was other. And then I remember one of my Jewish classmates telling me about a time she'd gone to a camp that was, I don't know, out somewhere, maybe it was even just like Southern Illinois, and the person found out she was Jewish and kept looking at her. And she's like, "What? I'm trying to find your horns." And she's like, "What?" So, yeah, that was an interesting
Imagine
story.
saying that to somebody out loud.
Yeah.
Like, oh my
Where are
goodness.
your horns, Julie?
They're under this mess of curls.
Yeah.
But
And I just say
yeah,
hi. Wow. I do have Jewish friends, and my brother-in-law and sorry, I don't need to say that my two nephews are, I guess, half Jewish. I don't have a problem with them. No. I do like.
I'm sure they're very nice.
They're wonderful. I'm just joking. He jokes like that too. Ed will make jokes sometimes, but I do like the fact that the Torah is actually considered the name of God. The whole thing. Again, the whole pantheon that you can't get it, that it's all God. The expression "it's all good" comes from Nietzsche. It's all God, and that's what he means. And we've changed it because God is good, I guess.
It's all good.
It's all God. It's all good.
It is what it is. All right. Born in 570 Common Era, this prophet believed that not only is there one God, but all the figures who came before in Judaism and Christianity are his prophets. It's hard to find a picture of him, though, because of its faith's prohibition against idolatry.
Islam.
Yeah, Muhammad.
Mohammed.
Yes. Probably is any influence from Muhammad in your lives?
I admittedly don't have much knowledge.
I had a bartender
So do I.
who was a Muslim.
Really?
Yeah, her name was Mo Esha, something or other. I forget her last name, but her father is actually a Sufi mystic. She went to Berkeley in California, and she tended bar at my favorite spot. And I walked in there one day, and it was when the French cartoon came out about Muhammad depicted. And there were two people, customers, guests, or whatever, sitting at the bar. And I walked into an argument. And she was saying, "It is blasphemy." And they were saying, "It's not blasphemy. It's not my God." And one of them, true story, turned to me and said, "Let's see what this guy," not knowing I was a regular, said, "Let's see what this guy thinks." And they told me, "Is it blasphemy, the cartoon, if it's my religion, or is it blasphemy if it's not my religion and I badmouth Allah, or is it not because it's her religion, not mine?" And my response was, first of all, never argue with a bartender. And I left it at that. And then she said, "Your first is on me, Jude." And so that was a good day. But then after they left, we had a discussion, and she was all riled up because she was just poised to go back to Afghanistan to face the Taliban in court to get her family home back. And so that's what she was dealing with. And these two ignorant guys were like, it ain't blasphemy. You know, I was like, that's certainly disrespectful.
I will say I have on many occasions really enjoyed the look on some people's faces, usually like very staunch conservative Christians, when I point out that they worship the same God as Muslims
Mhm.
because it's all the same. Abrahamic
Muhammad
family.
was an illiterate peasant, I guess they used to call him, because I guess he wasn't very well liked, or people made fun of him. He spent a lot of time on his own. And it's supposed to be that it was the angel Gabriel that visited him and dictated the Quran to him. And he spirit wrote the whole book. That's what they say, in a cave, over time. And then people were amazed that this illiterate kid wrote all this stuff, and then it started and all that. And it's not like I've read quite a bit about it. I wish I had more experience with it because I do like exploring other religions. But Islam is, I have to say, I have read the Quran. I found it very harsh. Perhaps it was just the translation. But I had a Quran that actually came back from Kuwait, from a friend of mine who was in the first Gulf War. And we won't get into the politics of Gulf Wars and all that right now. But I am interested in learning more about it. Sufism is a different aspect of Islam. Most Islam, there's no alcohol, no drugs. You're supposed to live strictly by the book. And there's actually, I understand that in Islam, partying and dancing is looked down upon, and the Sufis twirl and dance in ecstasy and get drunk to, commune with their God, and this whole ceremony. But they do tolerate it. They do allow it.
I
And
feel
I don't understand a whole lot about the hierarchy of Islam, or if there's anyone really in charge of it. It may be dispersed like other religions are.
there
lowest
do
level.
seem to be a lot of different, it's seems to be a lot very teacher driven.
Mhm.
So,
Imam,
Yeah.
mullah,
because it can vary from country to country, not just which sect you're in.
mhm.
But the challenging thing about Islam is that so much of our experience with it is a barrier. It came from, most of our modern experience comes from war.
Mhm.
And so it's hard to have, make those connections when it didn't seem to really enter our consciousness until
Mhm.
2001.
And here we are, possibly another crusade brewing. It's,
Like- I do know that from reaching back from like high school, studying very short summaries of world religions, that they talk a lot about the pillars of Islam, which are, the aspects of life that all Muslims are supposed to complete, essentially, kind of, like their rites of passage in a way. And one of them everybody knows is the Hajj, the pilgrimage. One of them is facing east while praying, or facing Mecca while praying. But there's also one that is charitable giving, and they put a number on it. They're supposed to give a certain percentage of their income or their wealth to charity, but not just charity. It's supposed to go directly back into their community. And there's another one that I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it has something to do with freeing prisoners, or not holding prisoners for like insanely long amounts of time. I can't really remember the details. But I know that there was a community somewhere in America a few years back whose modern interpretation of that was to raise funds to post bond for people awaiting trial, because like that's become like a huge oppressive thing.
It's like pre-prison.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
imprisoned while you're still presumably innocent.
Yeah.
And so there was a Muslim community that decided that they were going to start this bail bond organization to kind of fulfill that pillar of Islam in their community. So when you get past those barriers that you were talking about, and you look at what they actually expect from their community, it's the same things that you see in any other organized religion, which is take care of the people in your community.
Yeah.
they say it's good to give alms or charity, best to give it in secret. Is a Muslim teaching about charity. Not supposed to brag about your charity work.
That reminds me of saying about praying from Jesus. That you should do
And
it
pray
in
in
quiet. Yeah,
Yeah.
not in public.
Yeah, well, I think that was more about don't be hypocritical in your prayer.
Yeah.
What you say in public should match what's in your heart. Yeah, that was my interpretation.
But there's also like I think with charitable giving, sometimes the more public and flashy you are with it, it's not about the cause. It becomes about
Yes.
yourself
Look
and
how
being
cool I am.
seen. And yeah.
Look how big a tax break I'm getting. Yeah.
Okay. Born in India in 1469, this first guru wrote more than 900 poems. His faith, often lost in the sauce with Hindu and Islam, professes both monotheism and not. And adherents follow three principles: sharing with those in need, earning an honest living, and meditation / not falling for the five thieves. And tell me if these sound familiar: lust, anger, greed, attachment, and pride.
Like the first one.
I'm not in love.
Here. Is this the last one? Because I'm guessing Guru Nanak.
Yes.
We are the people of the book.
Yes.
We are the people of the
Guru
book.
Nanak of the Sikh tradition. So, thank you. I'll remember that. I'll try to remember. Any experience with that?
No.
The only
Very
thing
little.
I
The
know
only-
about it is that people often confuse Sikhs with Muslims based on looks, and that's the extent of my knowledge.
I know that they have a thing against cutting hair,
Yeah.
and so that's why the Sikhs wear the turbans.
Yeah.
Believe that?
I actually know something about
Sure,
more
come on
about
up.
the turban.
Jump in. Yeah.
There's space. So I had a conversation with a sick person once.
We know what you meant.
Yes. And they described their turban as a way to let people who need help identify them, because they are called to help anyone who asks. And they felt very strongly about that.
I'm looking at our chalice right now as you're saying that.
Yeah, something along those lines. Similar idea.
And they wear the dagger as a symbol of defending the underdog and standing up for people who are less powerful than you. It's not about violence. And they've just been granted in some states students permission to carry that knife into schools. And there was a bit of a controversy about it. I don't know a lot about them, but I do know that Guru Nanak traveled around and taught his poems, and I think he was the one that finally really, they consolidated it at his time into the book. And then when he passed, he said, follow no other guru, follow the book. So the book is in a temple, and they worship the book and the word of the book. And they have a temple in India that is constantly, as I understand it, 24/7 feeding people, 24/7, all volunteer. And people who are on backpacking around the world go there for meals, and it's just one big cafeteria, and they're just serving food all day long because people shouldn't go hungry. And I do know, I think it's Michigan recently. I have a lot of free time lately, being out of work on workman's comp. I've been watching a lot of documentaries and learning. They recently started a food truck. I think it's in Michigan, or I forget exactly where, but it's the Midwest. And they're going to inner city schools because they've cut lunch programs, and they're showing up and just, I guess, feeding neighborhoods for free, which is just wonderful.
Yeah.
I do want to learn more about them now that I know all that. I've tried to study almost every world religion
I can
and
tell.
Show.
And there's just so much, you know, it's just, sometimes I get hooked on one and I'm studying that for like 6 months and I forget about the rest, but, you know.
All right, so our last one before we take a break. So when practicing Wicca or neo-paganism, from my observation, could be purely anecdotal, most adherents follow the guidance of stories about these many gods from Norway or Ireland, Scotland, and pre-Christian Britain. Not the guru.
They don't have gurus.
I don't think I understand what answer you're looking for.
Oh, so
You're looking for like Luke,
It's
the
a
god
tough
of light.
one. Because
It's a long
it-
list.
well, because
The Force.
because there's no like
My
one
goodness.
like voice to point to. I did want to bring in the Celtic and Norse pantheons and those who have kept the faith and those who have brought it back
Mhm.
in a way.
Well, the Celtic and Norse pantheons you find in a lot of different pagan and witchcraft communities, but Wicca has its own deity system. Even though a lot of the traditions kind of pull from other pre-Christian traditions, Wiccans have their own like dual deities, the Lord and Lady, and that's very different from the vast pantheon in Celtic paganism and Norse paganism.
So who would be considered the voices for each of these communities?
I think at this point you're kind of getting into modern day prophets.
Yeah.
Most pagan religions at this point are like reconstructionist things because they've been completely lost over time. So you're talking more about like probably living people. Like somebody that comes to mind for me is John Beckett, who was a UU druid, and he's actively, sharing knowledge and things like that. And you can go back to like Gardner and Crowley and some of those more famous like witchcraft styled voices that wrote many books on basically how to revive witchcraft and folk practices and kind of forming a more ritualized, not really religion, but I guess it's become religion, but kind of bringing them back into modern context, I guess. Am I on the right track here?
Drawing down the moon. I forget who wrote it.
Margot Adler.
Margot Adler, yeah. She did a lot of research into pre-Celtic and stuff, and they say maybe she imagined a lot. Some people say, but because there's really no hard evidence. But she is the one that instigated the investigation as to whether or not there was a matriarchal cult present on this planet before the rise of us horrible men. Yeah, a lot of it's about the earth. I think of Odin a lot when I think of Celtic religion and mythology, but I've recently learned that there was a migration of Celts, and they actually trace a lot of their belief back to India, because the word Aryan is actually an ancient Hindu word that means nobleman. And they trace the language now. So the language goes from Ireland and Scotland, Germany, Northern, and then it goes into what is now Siberia, in the steppes. And then they trace their roots to Iran, which is home of the Aryans, and then back to India. So there's actually Hindu influence in Celtic mythology that nobody knew about before. Or it's from the same people over thousands of years carried, and that idea morphed into Norse mythology, possibly.
You ask us about like how these impact our beliefs, right? And I just want to point out that I think there's a degree that we don't know as well. Like so much of like this older stuff ends up affecting our language and our like stories in ways that we don't even realize until we start looking into it, right? Like take the days of the week, right? Oh, Wednesday, Woden's Day, Thursday, Thor's Day.
Freya's Day, I'm in love.
Yeah.
Wish there was an eight. She's pretty hot.
Lauren, you have practiced Wicca for a long time.
Yeah.
How does this factor into your spiritual life? Is it your main?
It was, but this is what I was saying at the beginning where I've changed over time. I mean, I practiced Wicca for years in high school and in college, but then it's even a little bit past, but then it's just sort of, changed and morphed into other things. So I would no longer consider it to be like a core part, but it's funny because I've been alive for a lot of years now.
No.
That's my way of saying I'm getting older. And I look back or I think back on stuff. I'm like, wow, I was way into something. I was rereading something about Joan of Arc that I had written when I was getting ready for this. Although I think we're running out of time. And I was like, wow, I really knew a lot about her. And I'm reading back what I wrote. I was like, oh, I forgot all of this. But I think that at times I was like way into various things. I did read the Tao of Pooh and the Day of Piglet because I wanted to learn about Taoism. But now I sort of maybe have shaved off pieces and kind of like we don't think about how Wednesday comes from Woden's Day. I don't even know what is influencing my beliefs anymore.
Before we are running out of time. We didn't get to everything I had hoped for, but that's okay. This is your panel, so I don't want to direct you down just the way I want to go. What are some just living voices or dead that you feel, obviously didn't get any credit from my list, but you feel are shaping how you believe and maybe contributing to our own beliefs in ways we don't even realize?
Yeah, I have a long list of those, but in the interest of time, I will keep it short. So I feel like there's 3 like living, breathing prophetic voices who are alive and actively speaking today that I think need to get more ears. So the first one is Malala Yousafzai, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. And she speaks a lot about education, especially the education of women. I'm sure everybody here knows she was, as a child, shot for going to school because she was female, and has used her second chance at life to really shine a light on how important education is, how important women's issues are. So I'll give a quick quote from her. There are 2 powers in the world. One is the sword, and the other is the pen. There is a third power stronger than both, that of women. A second living prophet that people really need to pay attention to more is Greta Thunberg. Another one who is a child, who has essentially given up her childhood to convince all of the supposed adults on this planet to get their shit together and not let global warming completely destroy this planet. And like Malala, has totally lost her youth and totally lost her childhood trying to advocate for something that is very important. So let's see, which one do I want to share? If I live to be 100, I will be alive in the year 2103. When you think about the future today, you don't think beyond the year 2050. By then, I will, in the best case, not even have lived half my life. What happens next? In the year 2078, I will celebrate my 75th birthday. If I have children or grandchildren, maybe they will spend that day with me. Maybe they will ask me about you, the people who were around back in 2018. Maybe they will ask why you didn't do anything while there was still time to act. What we do or don't do right now will affect my entire life and the lives of my children and grandchildren. What we do or don't do right now, me and my generation can't undo in the future. And I really liked that one because it's true. All of our target dates are 2050, 2050, 2050, but life goes on way past that. So she's a voice that really needs more ears. And then my third one is an Indigenous woman named Robin Wall Kimmerer. She's an Indigenous person who is really deep into her spirituality, but she is also a scientist. And she focuses a lot on how those two things are not mutually exclusive. And again, another one that talks a lot about we need to get our shit together before it's too late for this planet. So this one I think is really kind of sums her up a lot. This is really why I made my daughters learn to garden, so they would always have a mother to love them long after I'm gone. So those are my three kind of modern voices that I'm trying to pay a lot of attention to.
Lauren, you said you had some voices.
Well, I am really fascinated by some of the women in Christianity, especially when women's voices were not as listened to, like Joan of Arc or Hildegard von Bingen or Julian of Norwich, who, with the exception of Joan, the other two at least were, actually I'm not sure about Julian, were nuns or holy women in the Christian faith. But, you know, to various extents, it was so much of it was visions that they had. And the thing that fascinates me is, when did we start calling people crazy when they had the visions? And does it matter if Hildegard's visions were caused by migraines or Joan of Arc's were caused by schizophrenia or something? Like, this isn't anything that really affects my spirituality necessarily, but it's something that's interesting that I like to think about.
I mean, it's not like we just started dismissing women's voices as being crazy talk.
Yeah.
I
Long
have.
history of that.
But they almost got more, they were listened to more because of their visions and things, and saying that they were from God, and then priests or whomever believing them. And yet these days we would say, oh, well, she has schizophrenia, or, you know, those are your migraines, here, have some medicine.
Someone who continues to have an impact on me is Eckhart Tolle.
I just stole mine.
If you're not familiar with him, he wrote The Power of Now and some others. And just the whole, how he focuses on being aware of the present moment and not letting all the other things in the world change how you are about yourself. He talks about how people take a situation and they make a problem out of it. And that there's always problems, there's always things going on around us, but how we allow that to impact us is our decision. And it just says how much more control we have than we realize.
Well, Lauren just said about when they start calling people crazy. Eckhart Tolle has a teaching where he talks about, he's on a train one day and he's just going about his business, and there's a woman knitting and she's babbling blah, 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 to herself like a mad woman, and everybody's on the train scooching away from her, leaving her alone. And then, you know, he's leaving the train and some guy says, yeah, people jibber jabber, crazy people talking to themselves. What's this world coming to? So he says, well, you know, I don't know. He goes into the bathroom and he says that he's doing his duty and he's washing his hands and he's saying, that poor woman, I wonder what the hell is her problem, blah, blah, blah. And then he looks up and there's a guy staring at him because he's talking to himself, washing his hands. Yeah, so, you know. And it also reminds me of a joke a comedian said once, a man walked by me on the street ranting and raving about, you were never in the Navy. You don't know what you're talking about. And then he said, a few blocks later, I run into another guy who said, I was in the Navy. You don't know what you're talking about. So maybe they are talking to each other.
Well, now when you see people talking to themselves,
Yes.
they often have their earbuds in. and they're
Yeah.
That's what I assume.
That's how I get away with it now. This is yeah. But I do like, excuse me, Eckhart Tolle. He was just recently on the chat or the whatever the show is with Oprah, and they were pushing this book again. But The Power of Now is a very a good book. I like it. Does he the one that tells to meditate while looking at the minute hand of a clock, if I remember? And you say to yourself, every time it ticks, you just stare at it and say to yourself, now, 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 now. And then you realize that what they call eternity isn't something stretching into the future or into the past, that eternity is now, the ever-present moment. You know?
Or something as simple as just
Yeah.
looking at your hand and really looking at your hand and those, how amazing that is that you can move one finger without moving the others,
Maybe
or you can move them all.
Yeah.
Or you can, how can you even do that? How can you even have the
Yeah, because
ability?
I
just
can
you
sit
think-
there and do
you
this
just
and
think
talk
it
to you
and
about something without even thinking of it. My
the-
hand
the-
is
the
operating.
miracle of just how our bodies, how we can, there's so much more there than we just take for granted.
I think he's affiliated with the Findhorn Institute in Scotland.
Mhm.
So our closing for today, the closing question for the panel. Has what we consider prophetic changed? Has it changed over time? Is it different now? Or, like the figures we were talking about at the beginning of this panel, does it feel like we're still trying to get the basics down? And if we're repeating ourselves, why?
Well, I said earlier that I feel like there are universal wisdoms that just keep getting re-amplified, with every generation. And I think that it's probably because we do a good job at listening for a while and then we forget. And then life gets hard and somebody comes along and says, wait, but remember, it used to be better when we did these things. We should do these things again. Or they get presented as something totally new. But I feel like we kind of keep going through cycles of that in life. But I think there's also kind of a new existential threat currently with global warming that has not existed prior to now, which I think is bringing about new wisdom and new voices and a new sense of urgency that, we really need to consider how we live our lives in relationship to others and in relationship to the planet. So I think we're kind of drawing on that universal wisdom and lighting a fire under it and saying, like, there are real consequences for not listening to these messages that different people over the vast existence of humanity have constantly been having to remind us of. So I think in some ways it's the same messages all the time, but the circumstances under which they're needed are different.
So like 70 years ago, you needed to listen to those voices to not go to World War.
Yeah.
But now we have to listen to those voices and take what people have been trying to tell us all this time and save the planet. For us, anyway.
Yeah.
Planet will still be here.
Yeah.
But,
Save humanity.
yeah.
I had to learn that prophecy isn't necessarily foretelling of the future.
Mhm.
The word prophet means truther or truth teller or speaking truth to power, the voice crying in the wilderness. So it jives with what Julie just said. It's appropriate to every time when it's needed. A modern prophets, I did jokingly say about Eric Clapton, I do find, inspiration in a lot of music, in lyrics, in poetry, that is totally outside of any religious context. But then it clicks in my, and I go, oh, that's associated with Hindu and this, that, and I see sometimes, and they may not even, he has his song Layla, which is about the woman Muhammad was supposedly in love with, and she shunned him. That's a tale. She thought before he was a prophet, the illiterate peasant, she didn't want anything to do with him. So Layla was her name. So when Clapton fell in love with George Harrison's wife, someone he couldn't have, he wrote Layla for her. So it's, maybe there's a prophetic link there. I don't know, but I do find it in poetry and in music a lot. I do like Malala, what's her name? Yousafzai. I always mispronounce that. She is named actually, ironically, after a legendary figure in the history of Afghanistan that saved their ass and helped establish the country of Afghanistan. And then decades and centuries later, they're saying women shouldn't be educated. I got off on a little tangent there. But modern prophets, I'm going to have to think about that and find some for next year's panel discussion.
Mike, Levi, Lauren, any last thoughts? All right, then we're going to.
May I say that if you are interested in prophecy, Millennium Book of Prophecy by Jonathan Hogue compiles all of the prophecies from history, from almost every religion. If you're interested in that, just want to plug that.
Thank
One of my favorite books, Millennium Book of Prophecy.
Are there any questions or comments from the panel before we extinguish the chalice? I know we're over time.
Do we want to send these around too while people are
Yeah.
asking?
Yeah, while we're. This panel is brought to you by our sponsors.
Listeners like
Kind of
you.
like PBS.
Thanks, Maddie.
That's good.
Well, if there's nothing from the audience, then we'll extinguish our chalice and move on to what most people are really here for, coffee hour.
I was just like, I'll say thank you for listening.
Yeah.
I like this format. It's very interesting.
Yeah, we may have to do this yearly. It's kind of fun.
We'll bring up different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see this again. Or even like other variations on this.
Yeah.
Like different topics and stuff.
We'll
I
do-
like this format very much. And at the other UU church I had attended for a bit, that had people like, talk about their spirituality and write, what would you call it?
Testimonial.
Yeah,
Like what
that
they
kind of
believe.
thing. And
Proclamation.
they'd read these long letters. It was just kind of, I like it a little less formal, a little more give and take, a little more, switching subjects a little more frequently, all that kind of stuff. But I like this.
I stole this from the corporate world.
There's wisdom even in that sometimes.
So, yeah, and this is how I apply this to business sales for my LinkedIn post.
This is what our marketing team has been saying.
So with that, who wants to do the honors of blowing out the chalice? We extinguish this flame,
but not the light of truth, or the warmth of community,
or the fire of commitment.
These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Knew it this
Thank
way.
you.
Never heard that
We're gonna undo what we did.
You did that. Wow, that's